Thank you so much for those kind words, Nicole. And thank you for coming this evening. It's quite interesting because I met Nicole 7 years ago and we've just met again. And it's given me that chance to look back at those 7 years. And what's really strange is that not much has changed. Because as a studio, we've always been totally fascinated by ideas and follow ideas in any direction that they take. We don't have much of a plan, really. You know, we're open to that sense of adventure and surprise. And so what I thought I'd do is share some of the projects that we've worked on over the last 10 years. So as Nicole said, we're based in London, in East London in Hackney. And I'd like to show you a project that actually I started when I was at the Royal College of Art doing my MA. And our professor at the time was Ron Arad, and he set his students the brief to grow a product. And that's all we had to go on. You know, it was as simple as that. Guys, grow a product. And I remember thinking about this and thinking, like, how do I start? And I went to the canteen and I saw this polystyrene cup because I was getting a coffee. And I remember holding this polystyrene cup and thinking, it's actually quite an interesting material. It can withstand great heat, it's soft, it looks quite mysterious. And I don't know why I actually did the next bit, but I went back to my apartment in Ladbroke Grove and I opened up the oven door and I placed the cup inside and I closed the oven and I turned on the heat and I looked inside and this is what I saw. So you can imagine as a student, I was kind of completely fascinated by what I was seeing because all of these shapes I could never draw, I could never imagine them. But I was totally kind of excited because it looked as though there was a growth process happening. And what was really interesting for me as well was as these cups were shrinking, they were becoming really, really strong. So I thought maybe this is an opportunity to make something.
Paul experimented with this new material at home until he came up with the technique in 2002 that would successfully create his first commercial product.
Everybody who buys a styrene gets a light that's absolutely unique, and each styrene light will behave slightly differently in different circumstances. So it is a really, really magical piece of work that comes from this sort of very ugly, and let's face it, often horrible to drink out of, polystyrene cup. He's turned something very humdrum and mundane into something that's exceptionally beautiful.
And so here is the styrene lamp. And it came at a really important moment for me actually because, you know, I left college, I had no money, and I didn't want to get a job because I was worried about focusing too soon in a way. And so I had this opportunity to go to the local shop and spend £10 and buy a big box of cups. And I spent the next 6 or 8 months shrinking and making these lamps that I was selling to people. You know, not hundreds and hundreds, but it was good that I actually did place that cup in the oven, because it allowed me to kind of remain as free as I possibly could when leaving college. During the same kind of time, I was really excited and interested in electricity, because, as you know, it's in our mobile phones, our computers, but it's kind of hidden. And I wanted to kind of get closer to it, to kind of try and understand it slightly better, because I had no idea what properties electricity really had. And during my research, I saw this image of a block of graphite. And graphite is quite an interesting magical material, because it shimmers like a metal, but it's a non-metal. And so it conducts electricity. I found out that a pencil that I draw with every day contains graphite. And so I brought these two things together, and I did this experiment. So suddenly my drawings were conducting electricity just because of the pencil. And there is no tricks here. It really is the simple pencil line. And from this experiment, I then designed my second lamp.
In another light called Watt, he's used the conductive qualities of pencil graphite to make a light that turns on with a doodle. I love this light because it engages the user in both a creative and a practical act. I can imagine that in Paul's world, we interact with inanimate objects far more, which might make life more complicated, but would certainly make it more fun.
And so, kind of continuing that idea of electricity, walking through Hyde Park, beautiful sunny day, and the leaves were kind of glowing because of the sunlight, and I picked a leaf and looked at it, and because I was totally obsessed with electricity, I saw, looking at these connections and lines, and I thought, this looks like a circuit board in a way. So I back to the Ladbroke Grove flat, and I got 2 crocodile clips and started to push electricity through the leaf. And what I was kind of almost quite childishly fascinated by was that because there's water in that leaf, it can conduct electricity. And I was very, very pleased and excited that I'd found this little discovery. I mean, kind of electrical people would have known this, but for me it was a big deal. And so I designed this lamp, and it's a glass vase. You fill it with water, you take a fresh flower and you place it inside, and light comes on. And because of the water that's in the stem of the flower, it's the connection to electricity, it's the connection to light. And we did this film that kind of shows that process, that journey of the flower dying, the water drying out, and when that happens, it takes light with it. So it's not about designing the most practical, functional object, but it's about telling a story within a piece of design. And so the last 2 pieces, they're kind of small pieces of design, kind of tabletop pieces. And I think there was an instinct that I had, which I wanted to kind of share that kind of enthusiasm about electricity and connectivity to a larger audience. And we had this opportunity to do a project in Milan, and it was during Christmas time, and the city council invited us to think of something, a light piece. And I sent the client this video. So we go from the flower to the human touch. So the touch here is the connection to electricity and light. And so I sent this across and I said, look, what do you think? And they were totally confused. They're like, what is this video? And they said, look, we want to understand how you'd like to use this kind of idea. And so I kind of cheekily put together this visual where I chose one of the most beautiful places, in my opinion, in Milan, which is the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele. And the idea here is that we would cover the entire dome with LED light. We would have a mistletoe and a stage, and we would invite people to kiss under the mistletoe. And when the lips touch, light would come on. So you can imagine me saying this to the people, and they were like, "Is it safe? We like the idea, but is it possible?" And there was a lot of discussions and passion and kind of convincing. And a young guy in his 20s, they offered this space to us, and it really meant a lot to us because we really wanted to think of something that brought people together, but in a very natural way. So this is the piece. People kiss, and light comes on. So it's taking that very intimate act and transforming it into something. And what was really fascinating for me to see this event unfold was that there was no instruction book necessary. People were just queuing up and kissing and kissing. And I was like, what have we started here? But people were so excited about this transformation of the architecture, so it was just amazing. It's like, for me to see this is my iPhone just recording this all those years ago. So during the evolution of the project, I was quite worried that it would just be about kind of the fun of kissing, and I wanted to add another layer. And so what I did is I had another meeting with a bank this time, and I said, look, if I can get people to kiss, would you give euros in exchange? Again, confusion and passionate discussions, but they agreed. So over the course of 5 weeks, we had 100,000 kisses, and we made 100,000 euros for a children's charity. So it was taking that enjoyment and spreading that beyond Milan through charity. And we don't tend to repeat work, but because it was so enjoyable to work on something like this, we've lit up other things. The Kiss has turned on Christmas trees in London and Shanghai. And Shanghai, they've enjoyed it so much that we did a 3-year contract for Kiss. It was amazing, really. And we were nervous again, like, will people kiss? Is this something in public? Because there's like that. And the Italians, they love the idea, and the British we thought would be quite conservative, but they were kissing. And then we went to Shanghai, and then they were. It's great. So we go on tour with this idea. We repeat the same spirit of the project. There's always the charitable aspect as well. So the kisses raise money. So that was quite enjoyable, that idea that we've gone from like small objects to something outdoors where people from all sorts of places can experience a piece of design. And so it kind of naturally led on. We had opportunities to think of other things. So again, a lighting festival in Lyon. This is the mayor's office. And if you go through here, there's a lovely courtyard with a fountain. And I'm very interested in the idea of paper, because you take a piece of paper and you can curl it upwards and it becomes pleasing for me. And I wanted to kind of translate that idea into a piece of work which started here. And so this is the piece, and all of those sheets are hand curved, molded by us, and they're light. So that makes it quite tricky, actually, to have something glowing suspended outside. It became a project where the idea was so simple. It wasn't. You it didn't even need to describe the idea, but to technically achieve it became quite complex. So we had to really think about wind and snow and rain and the structure. So there's a net between these two buildings, and then there's wires and electricity which feed every single sheet. And so the project got quite complex and headaches and, but once we achieved what we wanted to do, the pictures that we started to take made sense to us because the complexity disappeared. It was just the sound of the fountain and light and people looking upwards, children seeing something that they haven't seen before. And so unfortunately, the piece was just there for a week, and so it's in a box somewhere, and these are the memories we have. But they kind of mean a lot to us. Money. So this is our 1 penny piece, and this is has the least value, and most people in the UK have this in their pockets, and I was quite interested by that. It's like something that they carry around with them, and it's quite an interesting coin actually because it's copper on the outside, but it's got a little bit of magic within that small little coin, and I can show you what that is. So these coins that we have in our pockets, they are attracted to a magnet, and I thought that's really quite interesting. I'd love to use that simple idea to create a piece of work. So we had this opportunity to think of a sculpture, and this is my father and my niece here, and she'll explain it. So she runs to my mum here, gets a coin and runs back. And so what she's doing is she's allowing that magnetic field from this piece we created take the penny from her. So this was before, you can see the fence around it. This is before we opened it to the public. So the young girl was without any direction doing what we thought she would do, and then suddenly we opened up the fence, and then people were just drawn to this large coin, the circular coin that we'd made. And what was interesting for me was this idea of transformation. So it starts off this brass, kind of semi-polished form, and it becomes human-plated in copper, in coins. So people would put their names in the coins, they would create shapes like this, and it was just very, very, again, quite enjoyable to see how an object with just some magnetism can create interactions and moments and photos. And this, when it was completely covered. So I was in my studio and I was thinking to myself, with a piece of paper, again, starting with that A4 sheet, I was kind of playing with this sheet, and at a certain moment, I saw a table, and I showed this to my gallerist and said, look, if we take a sheet of material and we roll it, we can make a table, and it looks as though it's going to fall over. And I said, look, it's going to be super simple. It's going to be just one gesture, and it's going to be like a ballerina, just on the smallest of points. And he said, great, let's do it. And so again, a very simple starting point. But then what happens if you start to design with the idea of something falling over? When we started to do our calculation and simulate weight going onto this form, they started to fall over. And that was annoying. I was thinking this is meant to be simple. And it suddenly became a project that took months and months to try and tweak this shape so that it could be stable. And so we did the calculation, we did the mathematics, we did the center of gravity here, and we had glimmers of hope that something might work. But what we had to do was make. And so we went to a company, a steel company, and we got a piece of 20 mil steel, and we rolled it to create the first table. And as you can see, it's extremely heavy. We need a machine to lift it. And this was the first time I saw the table. I took this photograph, and I loved the way it looked. It had the lift in the corner. It looked exactly like the piece of paper. But I was also very scared because it weighs half a ton, and just thinking about that falling over made me a bit worried. And so my niece came back to help me, and so she went onto the table as a testing prop, whatever the word is. Anyway, so we placed her on the table. It didn't fall over, so suddenly we kind of became a bit more confident with the object and started to enjoy it. And we brought it back to the studio, and a dancer friend came to the studio, and he wasn't as scared as I was, and he lifted himself onto this piece. And what was really interesting is that this table has a footprint of maybe this much. It's tiny, it's just in the very corner. But it's the table with no legs, but can withstand weight more than most tables. So it wasn't about achieving that, but it was about this idea of balance and celebrating the rawness of the material. So we don't touch it really. We leave the patination of the steel as part of the project. So we're not making thousands of these. These are limited edition pieces that we make 5 and 5, 10 pieces or something. Because it would make no sense to make tables that weigh half a ton. But in that small number, there is a joy there. So I often go to factories, and just out of curiosity, and this was a foam factory I went to not so far from my studio, and in a way it's kind of like the polystyrene cup. It's foam, it's soft, and I wanted to kind of use this idea of compression somehow, because when you take a block and you push onto it, it becomes curvaceous. And I think the best way to explain this, if you imagine a big block of foam and then a few people lifting a really heavy block of marble and placing it on top, this was what I wanted to imagine. So we did this. So this is a huge block of foam with a very heavy piece of marble. And when you let go, it sinks, but the angle, the block, the right angles become curvaceous. And I looked at this idea and thought, when it goes down, this could be a perfect place for someone to sit. And so we made the compression sofa. So this is a solid block of marble, a soft piece of foam, and then upholstered, so everything is held in. So I never drew the shape, it was kind of given to me by the process of weight and compression. And what I thought, once I've done this combination of a small hard piece and a big soft piece, I kind of quickly thought, if we swap those materials round, what could that be? Would that be interesting? And we were allowed to do it. So I went to a quarry and I chose a huge block of marble. And so we made the opposite. So we carved into this block. That took about a month and a half. And then we put a small cushion. And so they kind of sit next to each other. They're the complete opposites in terms of where you sit and in terms of materials. We've made one, and we'll only make one. 6 tons. 6 tons. So kind of back to light. And so this next piece is actually within a gallery show that we did in New York. And this is the piece here. So there's a corridor, and there's a space at the end where you perceive that a big window is open and sunlight is coming in and filling it with sunlight. So you walk along this journey thinking there's nothing apart from a big window. But when you go into this empty space and look up, you realize that there is no window, and there is thousands and thousands of squares of LED light with different colors shining towards you. And what's happening is all of those colors are invisibly mixing, and then they make white light when it gets to you. And so some people just walk through and don't even look up, by the way. But if you do stay in that space and you look up, you see all of these colors. But what we do is we slowly change those colors to fade to white and then bring them back to colors. But nothing changes in that room. So you kind of, if you're having a conversation, you could look up and see colors, carry on, look up and see white light, but the white light hasn't shifted at all. It's completely matched. And so the idea is that if you stay in that room and look up, you see colors, and you start to actually think about the sun and the fact that white light contains all color. So we used electric LED light in that example, but we felt that we needed to use the sun. So we thought of this building with a curved glass roof, and taking the knowledge that we had from the electric version in terms of color mixing. Each of these color squares are tinted glass, and so sunlight would come in, and at the beginning you get colors on the walls, on the floor, on your body, and as you walk to the very end, the glass roof curls upwards, and that colored light has more time to invisibly mix and give you white light at the end. So it was a space that had no function. We didn't imagine any activity happening there when we were building the model, but actually when we look at it now, we imagine it to be a place like a university or a library or a hospital, or somewhere where you need to think beyond the building and perhaps consider the energy that feeds us. So now we're in London, and we're in Soho. So it's very central London, and this building is called the Ampersand. And the property developer, the ambition was to rent out, there's three floors. So there's 3 floors in this building, and they wanted to rent it out to different companies. And we got this not so inspiring rendering of the space. It's the atrium space, so there's a lot of natural light coming in from the glass roof. And there was no brief really, but they wanted something here that kind of brought things to life in a way. And so what we did is, because of all of these different floors, we imagined people's usual journey that goes to the 1st and 2nd and 3rd floor, which would have taken place in the lift. So silence, no one talking. And we thought the staircase could be a really interesting addition to that atrium space. So we examined the spiral, and if you have a tight spiral staircase, you have a column running through the middle. The idea was to make that bigger, and if you do that, you tend to have a bigger structure in the center. We worked with Arup, the engineers in London, and magically they found a way of not having that big structure in the center, and so it gave us these 3 spaces in the center of this spiral. And so this is the staircase. It's called the living staircase, and it's made in wood, and each person who moves into the office gets a plant that they choose the position of it, which they can look after, like a garden. And in the center, we have these 3 spaces. Now, the office is totally high-tech, and so within these spaces, we wanted to do very, very simple but enjoyable activities. So there's a library, there's a space to draw, and at the top here, we grow fresh mint, where we, instead of going out into the chaos of London, you can go to the top and pick some mint and make yourself a healthy cup of tea. So here it is, the living staircase. And you can see the 3 spaces in the center of that spiral. So here you can use the Inga Mauer lamp to leave messages for people and clip them on to this lamp. Here's the space where you can make the tea. And I think as a project it was quite enjoyable in the sense that where KISS brought people together, this was doing the same sort of thing, but it was permanent. So we like the staircase, we like the way it looks, we like the kind of engineering achievement to it, but I think the most important thing is these kind of conversations that are happening, which may not have happened if people chose to take the lift. Cycling. Okay, so this is where I live. This is Broadway Market, and when you cycle along here, bike lights, this guy here, so bright, it really blinds you. You're cycling along, you almost fall off your bike. And so I knew that there was an opportunity to use like some of the knowledge I got from my light research to think of a different way of delivering light. So this is the blinding light, where you have LEDs really close to each other. And what we were thinking of is to put that light into a circle. So it's the same amount of light, but it's much softer. So here it is, it's called the 00. This is the front light and the back light. So the bright lights, but not blinding. But I'm not sure if you have this problem, but in London, if you go to a market called Brick Lane, you always find your bike lights that have been nicked. They end up at this market and you can buy them back, which is fine, but it was annoying because bike lights are quite expensive. So because we had this circle, which was delivering light in a more slightly peaceful way, slightly gentler way, we then used magnets. They click together like this, and then you can thread it through your D-lock and it stays with the bike. So that kind of, the light gave us the hole, which then becomes, solves a kind of functional problem. So this is a kind of a piece that we make in the studio. It's not for a company. We manufacture in China. So again, following the whole process from an idea to mass production. And because cycling was a theme, there was a competition in London, and it was to design a bridge. And this is Battersea, and it was a really interesting competition because this bridge was just for walking and cycling. So that's actually quite an interesting starting point when you don't have to consider the heavy car. And because we'd thought about the different rhythms that occur in a city, the walking rhythm, the calm walking time, or the busy time that happens. And then the cycling, again, you can cycle in London and it's very, very calm, but then other times when you're in a rush, it's very, very intense. And so what we didn't want to happen within this bridge that carries people across such a beautiful part of London is that you end up in this situation where you have cyclists coming to each other, angrily avoiding each other, and pedestrians and kids. It's kind of it didn't really. There was a bit of a problem there. So we took inspiration from water, and the fact that water never travels in a straight line and never just one line. And so this is the idea of the bridge. It's 3 lines that touch in places and separate in others. But what it's doing is it creates a way for you to have your own rhythm as you're crossing the bridge, so you can enjoy it. So that this small person here cycling can actually just focus on cycling and looking and disconnecting from the city and not worry about someone cycling towards them and swerving out the way. So it's a way of kind of considering the rhythm of different people in the city, but actually it gives us the form of a bridge that isn't symmetrical like most bridges. And again, we collaborated with Arup in understanding whether this could be possible. And what we really wanted to do was to be able to cycle onto the bridge, so you didn't have to get off your bike. So there's a spiral at the beginning and at the end. And also, because it doesn't have to have the car, suddenly there's actually quite an exciting opportunity here, because most bridges have columns that go from the bridge into the banks of the Thames that hold it up. Whereas because it's lightweight, what we've done is we've put the structure onto the banks. And so actually, you can kind of float across the bridge. There's nothing going into the water, so all of the structure is above. So we're quite excited about that idea that when you go on, you look up and you've got these thin wires that are holding you up like a spider's web. And this is my last project. It's to do with music, and it's to do with my walk to work. And the streets really feed me with ideas. And on my walk, I started to see these speakers with a post-it note which said, "Take me home." I didn't take it home, I took them to the studio, and I started to collect and make this wall of speakers. And I was looking at them, and I thought, firstly, they're quite beautiful. You know, they're made in materials that really deliver sound well. They still work. And I was thinking, why are people throwing them away? And the reason is because technology has moved on from the record player and the hi-fi. So I wanted to bring them back to life. And I'm going to show you a video. It's a little bit cheesy because it was a Kickstarter project, but it communicates the idea. These older speakers, designed decades ago, they still have the potential to give us great sound. The only thing they lack is a way of communicating with other technologies. That's where the VAB comes in, and I'd like to show you how it works. Using Bluetooth, the VAB receives the music and plays it through these type of speakers. Inside is a battery that powers the speaker, meaning all the wires and clutter that you're used to seeing are gone. Although the VAB is small, there is a lot happening inside. We have developed a circuit to perform really well with the variety of speakers you may attach with a little battery life. Here is the amplifier, the battery, the USB charge socket, the red and black speaker connector, the headphone socket, and the on and off button. For me, reusing perfectly good technology makes sense, and there is a beauty in the way these speakers look. They are part of our music history. If you have an old speaker in the attic or garage or spot on the street, you can bring back the sound at a fraction of it. And so we launched that on Kickstarter. We got the funding, which was fantastic. So no manufacturer. We didn't have to discuss the idea with anyone at this point. It was talking straight to people who were potentially going to buy it, and they really enjoyed the idea. They were kind of fascinated that this little red cube can bring back the sound to any size speaker. It's like, how is that possible? Totally simple technology, but just configured in a new way. And it was a lovely thing to work on because it was our first kind of mass-produced electronics product. And halfway through, we found out this statistic that 10,000 speakers a month get thrown away from just one recycling center. And so we went to see the recycling center, and I climbed in and I got all of these speakers, and I was like, this is crazy. So what we ended up doing was we brought these speakers back from this pile, and we treated them so well. We kind of wore gloves and we cleaned them, and we tested them. 95% of them work still. And so we put a little sticker saying, save a speaker. And you know, if you buy a Vamp, we just give you a speaker. And so you just end up opening the box, and you've got this speaker, which you may not even like it, but it sounds great and it still works. And it's about telling a story through a piece. And it was wonderful. You know, people danced, and that was something we've never kind of done before. So I hope that gives you a selection of ideas that we've worked on. Thank you.